The reality is that we don't know what's happening tomorrow. Everything is constantly changing. And so, therefore, the ability to work with these unstructured components really is the key to being able to price risk more efficiently.
Welcome to the Horizon Lab podcast. Today we spoke with Rock Schindler, who is the CEO of SD Refinery. SD Refinery is a company revolutionizing how insurance companies manage their risk assessment and their internal teams. He is one of the first pioneers of using AI within the insurance industry and has a lot of interesting insights along with it. So without further ado, welcome Rock Schindler. Hey Rock, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and excited to be here and have a conversation with you.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you, man. So you've been in the insurance industry for a little bit over 35 years. What initially drew you to this industry?
Yeah, great question. So I came out of college with an accounting degree, and only went into accounting because my older sister, was in accounting. So I came out of college, got hired as an auditor with Pete Marwick Mitchell, then eventually KPMG, and started auditing insurance companies. The way the industry works is that once you know something about insurance, you immediately become an expert. And so once you do a little, you do a lot. And eventually, just got recruited out of the public accounting world after 9 years, went to work for the reinsurance broker marketplace. And that's, of course, very dynamic. And that's kind of what pulled me in, kept seeing more and more insurance. And, kind of the way for me, I guess, the more time I've spent in the industry, the more I learn, the more I realize all the stuff I don't know. And so it kind of pulls me in deeper and deeper.
Yeah, definitely. So you guys work with AI, right?
That's right. Yes, we do.
So how do you integrate the AI when it comes to insurance? How does that look?
Well, a lot of the AI that's taken place in the marketplace is really in what I call the boundary segments of the industry, meaning that most people are focused on distribution, buying or selling. Insurance carriers are trying to sell more product to consumers and businesses. And likewise, when claims happen, they're trying to make a more efficient claim experience. And so, in both sides of the transaction, if you will, there's just an explosion of interactions going on, or let's say new technology trying to make the interactions with the outside constituents more effective, more efficient, so on and so forth. We're really focused inside the box and trying to help insurance carriers become more efficient in the work that they're doing. And I think that's a place where I ended up having a lot of experience early in my career, saw an enormous number, or excuse me, I saw an enormous amount of inefficiency in the way that the industry was conducting its business, and that led to seeing opportunities to do it differently.
Interesting. And so when did you start integrating AI, and was it recently? Because I know AI is now like the new fad, right? But did you realize this before it became the new fad?
Great question. No, we didn't set out to build an AI solution. We set out to solve a problem or address what we saw as an inefficiency. And that was really way back in 2006. And what we're doing right now with SD Refinery is actually the third entity, significant entity that we're using to accomplish the task. And it wasn't until one of my board members raised the point of saying, Rock, really what you're doing classifies as AI. And there's starting to be a lot more attention around AI. This is back in 2019, 2020. So we ought to think about bringing AI into our branding. And so that's what led us there. And yeah, that's how we got into that part of the business. Again, we didn't set out to build an AI solution. We set out to solve problems. And then, okay, now we're doing AI. But that also kind of feeds into, I think, a bigger challenge that the industry has, in that AI is a very broad, ambiguous term. And so somebody says AI and they jump to whatever definition they want to fit their particular perspective.
Interesting. Yeah. So I noticed you guys focus a lot on sentence data. Can you explain a little bit more what that is?
Yeah, if you look at when we first started, there was a lot of discussion around, let's say, unstructured data. And when you start trying to unpack, okay, well, what is unstructured data? You have to resolve the storage versus the content, meaning that you think of a typical database structure, it has fields in it. And one of the fields might be something that allows you to capture written documentation. So you've got a lot of small fields, but you got big fields as well. But then you also have document files. So you could have a PDF document that has a number of fields on it. For example, a name, a claim number, or a policy number, a data loss. But then it also has a whole bunch of written information. Well, when you start talking about unstructured data, okay, are you talking about the storage of it, meaning a document file is not structured, so technically it's unstructured. Okay. But then you also, if you look at the content, there is structured content on an unstructured document, and there's unstructured data in a structured storage environment. So it's just terribly confusing. And so, back early in the process, talking with companies, you'd burn precious bandwidth trying to resolve, okay, well, what exactly are you talking about? Okay, so then let's focus on content, because now we're talking about the actual information that's being written. But then if you think of text, if somebody says text, and a lot of people do, okay, text can come from a drop down field, it can come from a box that's selected, it can come from a system generating a prompt that you're supposed to do something. What we really care about in our company is the original content documentation, where people document in their own words the facts, the circumstances, and the decisions. And that really, if you will, is the most valuable part of the unstructured content, that being the sentence data.
Interesting.
And honestly, I'll tell you, I thought when we came up with sentence data, I thought it was incredibly sticky. I thought people would get it in a heartbeat. The reality is that it's really been slow on the uptake, and that's okay. I think people are starting to get it a lot more now. When we say sentence data, we're talking about original content documentation.
Do you find that it causes insurers to misprice their risk analysis?
Well, there's no doubt about it. And again, if you think about, you use the word unstructured in your response to me there, and if you define unstructured, okay, we have to pull in video, we have to pull in voice, we have to pull in images. And again, all that stuff is unstructured in its nature. And the industry is, of course, well, when I say industry, I'm talking about the technology industry, is continually ramping up its ability to do more with all forms of unstructured content. So we're focusing on the sentence, as we talked about a moment ago. But ultimately, to your question, everybody is really struggling to use the different parts of the data world, the unstructured content, the pieces that I just mentioned, because all those things are relevant to pricing the risk. But there's no question that at a very high level, if you think of it this way, Austin, if you knew what was going to happen tomorrow, you could design the perfect system, or you could design the perfect tools to look at any unstructured content or structured content, and you could sail off into the sunset and make a healthy margin. The reality is that we don't know what's happening tomorrow. Everything is constantly changing. And so therefore, the ability to work with these unstructured components really is the key to being able to price risk more efficiently. And we're trying to stay in our lane, which says that, okay, in that sentence data, in the facts, circumstances, and decisions, documentation, that's where we think there's the most opportunity to recognize what's happening to whom, where, when, how, and why, and react more quickly to it.
Interesting. And so what type of trends or changes have you noticed in the insurance industry lately? I mean, we have all this new AI, you guys have this product. I'm sure there are other people doing similar things as you guys. So what kind of changes have you noticed lately?
Well, one of the claim leaders that I talked to recently said that, it's no longer really about coming up with the best practices for a claim team or a team of individual claim adjusters, but rather now it's more about risk management, recognizing that each and every claim could turn into a nuclear or a thermonuclear event. And so carriers have to be much more careful in how they react to things. And to me, where that goes, and I'll be a little bit self-promoting here, in that ultimately the ability to understand at a granular level what's happening is kind of critical to being able to make the right decisions about risk. And I think that's where, if you go back 10 years when the industry started first working with predictive models, predictive models are very good tools, but a lot of operational executives end up being very frustrated that the predictive models will give you 100 claims that say, okay, there's something that could go wrong with these claims, and they lack the specificity to say, okay, here are the markers that are flagged on this claim, and here's what you should do about it, or here's how you should avoid this going nuclear. And so I think that's ultimately because of a lack of granularity. Excuse me, it's easier at a high level or at a macro perspective to identify trends and patterns, but you have to be able to bring it down to individual claims, individual transactions, and point to the specific factors about what somebody should or should not do. And I think that's really where the game can be won or lost.
Interesting. So you mentioned that there's a lot of these little key factors that might make a claim a little bit more risky or to go nuclear, as you say. Do the AI models now flag those things, or is it still like it was back 10 years ago?
There's no question that our flags are a lot better than they ever have been. The question is, how do we incorporate those into the daily routines of the adjusters? And honestly, that's kind of another, I'll say, element. There are certainly plenty of people competing to put more technology into the hands of the adjusters. Our particular focus is really a lot more about trying to identify when people are making the right decisions at the right time, including, are they using the right tool? Because ultimately right now what the industry what the industry knows is that a claim leader or a claim manager has to read a lot of files to figure out whether a person is or is not doing the right thing using the right tool. In other words, if I'm a claim leader, I teach my team of adjusters how I want them to use this new tool. How do I know if they're using it effectively? Okay, that requires then me going into files, or my quality assurance team going to look at the claim notes and evaluate whether it was or was not used properly. That's the part of the process that we're trying to change.
Interesting. So it's more looking at how people work and less looking at the factors of the risk in the claims itself.
That's correct. Yeah. And that's 100% correct. And it goes to, let's say, the nebulousness or abstractness that's inherent in risk, because you can look at any situation, you can give two experienced underwriters, two experienced actuaries, two experienced claims people the same data, and they can have very different opinions or views on what should happen, or if something did happen, what were the root causes that caused it to go one way versus another. And that happens, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times each and every day in the industry. And ultimately, again, what it comes down to is how well are people being able to react to situations and make the right decisions at the right time. The faster and better we can do that as an industry, the more success we'll have.
So would you say that your company plays more of a quality analysis or quality assurance type of role?
That certainly is a segment of what we're doing. And honestly, I try to avoid pigeonholing it. And it's the classic scenario for us that, one of the visions I had a long time ago, and I don't know if you were or were not around when the Excel spreadsheet or the early version of the electronic spreadsheet came out. It was in the late 80s, early 90s. When I started in the auditing business, we used to use 10 key calculators to add, subtract, multiply, divide. And of course, along come the spreadsheet. And it transformed the way businesses work with numbers. And it did that because all of a sudden now you could drop data into a spreadsheet, add formulas, pivot tables, charts, graphs, whatever. So that's kind of the same direction I'm trying to go with giving operational executives the ability to take a population of sentence data, drop it into a platform, that platform being the technology that we have, and then be able to answer business questions they have. Because every
Mm,
executive has different questions about what's going on within their team. And the questions they have today are different than the ones they had last month. And next month, they're going to have different questions. So how quickly and efficiently can you answer the business questions they have? Now, that was the vision I had. It's certainly been a long and winding road. And again, we're trying to stay in our lane and start with this element that I'm talking about in terms of quality assurance. And I think maybe there's a bigger, I know there's a bigger value proposition, but certainly a lot of what we're doing right now has an element of quality assurance. But again, I think it goes bigger and broader.
interesting. Do you think that there might be a time where AI starts to replace a lot of these teams, or do you think it's just going to empower them to do more?
I think it's just going to change the composition of the teams. I don't think
Okay.
that in my lifetime or yours, I don't think we're going to see AI being able to operate without a heavy involvement of human beings overseeing it. I mean, AI is a wonderful tool, and again, here we are talking about AI in a in a broad sense. There are many different
Mm,
types of AIs, but if you think of it in terms of, if you go back to, okay, we set out to solve a problem, we didn't set out to build an AI solution, but what we're doing right now, it would be impossible for any person or team of people to be able to emulate what we're doing. You just simply couldn't do it. Okay, so at that level, the computer will start, we'll use computer for this conversation synonymously with AI. So ultimately, AI, the computer technology, will start doing more and more things, but people are still going to, for the foreseeable future, for the next few decades at least, people are going to be heavily involved. And beyond that, I'm not a futurist. I don't,
yeah.
I don't know what it looks like, but I think we're a long ways away from having just having the computer underwrite and adjudicate risk.
Interesting. So keeping with that future theme, what do you think the insurance industry is going to be like in the next 5 or 10 years? How do you think it's going to change?
I think we'll see a lot more changes on the distribution. Uh, I think the marketplace will become a lot more efficient at finding the right products. And if you think of the insurance process right now at a fundamental level, it's a very simple process: underwrite risk, collect premiums, invest the premium, and pay claims. But when you peel it back, it just has enormous complexity. And so that complexity is not going away anytime soon, and it's in large part driven by just the coverage of risk and the fact that there are so many different terms and conditions that can be written into a policy form that directly impact what happens, of course, when an event happens and a claim is out there. So I think the industry will get a lot more efficient at writing or creating new products. And I think that will correspond to being more efficient on the back end as well in terms of settling that claim, paying that claim. But gosh, there's a long ways to go. And the better we get at pricing risk, the more granular it can become. And the more granular it becomes, the harder it becomes to price the risk. So, Elon Musk and Mark Andreessen, some of those industry leaders, they have talked for a while about their fear of where the AI models could go. And my personal belief hypothesis on why they feel that way is because when you think about the way AI operates, it's starting today. Well, think about the internet before we had any generative models, before we had ChatGPT, Gemini,
Yeah.
any other models. There was, let's call it, pure content. People had generated a lot of content of wide varying capabilities. So one of the things that I've done, a friend had tipped me off on this a while ago. I asked ChatGPT or some of the models to write a 2-page biography on Rock J. Schindler. And I can give it all sorts of prompts, but for whatever reason, it wants to associate me with the Schindler Elevator Corporation out of Germany. And I can give it some really strong prompts, but at the end of the day, it keeps coming back with a significant element of hallucination. Now, for me as a reader, I can see that in an instant. But if you ask ChatGPT to give you a summary on who is Rock Schindler, you wouldn't have any way of knowing that it's false information. So now that false information has been created and it's in the marketplace, it's in that environment. And as more and more people use these tools to create content, the purity level begins to be compromised because there's more and more levels of it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a long period of time, like the frog in the boiling water kind of syndrome. And so if you take that same notion that there are impurities, the key to making good pricing decisions is understanding the risk. And the challenge that you have, that any actuary or any pricing model has, is finding homogeneous risk. If every risk were the same, then it'd be easy to price it. But if you look back at what happened here a few years ago with the pandemic, and you look at the automobile risk, which is the most vanilla generic risk that exists on the planet, literally, okay, if you look at what happened coming out of the pandemic and the supply chain problems that happened, the inflation that took place, insurers ended up getting their clocks cleaned. They lost a ton of money, and it was because they couldn't quickly enough identify where problems were occurring in the pricing and the adjudication process. Now, there are a lot of factors that worked against them, including the fact that they had to rebate a bunch of money because people were driving so much less. And then people started driving faster, severity started spiking, frequency crept up. But bottom line is that they couldn't react quickly enough. And that's on the most vanilla risk that exists in the world. And again, if you go back to the point I'm trying to make is that risk continues to change, and the more the more new businesses are created doing unique, exotic things. And my company is a good example. I understand the risk in the insurance. If I work with my insurance company, and I specifically or intentionally won't name their name because I don't want to embarrass them, the reality is they don't know how to classify what I do because I don't fit into a bucket. Okay, well, guess what? There's a lot more businesses out there just like me that don't fit into a bucket, but insurance carriers only are able to price the cost of issuing a policy to me based on putting me into a bucket that's close to what they think, even though they don't know what I do. So the more you have, the more technology gives us an advantage to create more and more things to do better and better services or create more and more products, whatever you want to think of. 3D printing is a great example. A lot of new technologies are doing a lot of new things. Okay, well, how do you classify them? Again, if you knew what was going to happen, then you could build the perfect system. The reality is you can't. And so you're left to rely on the written documentation that describes what is the risk, what's happening to it, and how do we price for it.
Wow. That's interesting, man. I never really thought about the dilution of information like you were mentioning there. That's because that is true. I mean, a lot of people just take what GPT says at face value without really doing more actual research or cognitive thought about what it is saying. It's really, really good at like STEMs type of stuff. But as soon as you step out of that realm, like, how do you know what it says is true?
Yeah, that's right. Now, there are certainly applications for it. Like it has had a tremendous impact on my business for code development because I can solve many, many problems very, very quickly by giving some information to ChatGPT and saying, how do I get this information or how do I solve this problem?
Yeah.
And you can quickly, efficiently get it, test it. Yes, it works. Good. We're on to the next problem. Whereas before that might have been a 1 week or 2 week endeavor with a variety of different resources. Now I can solve it in 30 minutes using a technology tool. So things like that, though, also, while they're very beneficial, they go back to what I was describing a moment ago. they increase the speed and efficiency of people being able to do different things. And that's a good thing for our economy, but it ends up being not so good when you're trying to insure that risk.
Yeah.
And therein again lies the number one reason why insurance companies have such a difficult time pricing risk, and why I think why I'm still very bullish on the impact of people being involved in the process, using more and more sophisticated technology, no question about it,
Yeah.
because all the technologies are making people a lot more efficient and a lot smarter.
Yeah, that's good. So I always end the podcast with a really fun question. So if you were stuck on a desert island but could analyze one type of insurance data for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Yeah, that's a great question. It'd be workers' comp claim data,
Yeah.
because work comp claims are by far the most complex. They have the most factors going on in it, and they just ooze with complexity. And wherever there's more complexity, there's more judgment required by the people involved with it. And wherever there's more judgment, there's more documentation that can be analyzed for the purpose of solving problems faster and better.
Wow, I didn't know
So,
that. That's really interesting.
yeah, no, workers' comp is also highly regulated, so you've got that element. So if you had, there could be lines out there that offer the same level of complexity without the regulation. If you didn't have the regulation, then it would be, there would be no matching it. But arguably, there's probably things coming that will. That could be more interesting, but at least for the time being, cyber risk is a great example. Okay, cyber risk right now is a really, what would you say, blossoming line of business, and you don't know where the risk is coming from or what the risk looks like. People have a really broad perspective. So maybe if you ask me that question in 5 years, I'll tell you it's cyber risk. And of course, there aren't any regulations around cyber risk. But I guess with cyber risk, you're generally dealing. It doesn't. Again, you go back to workers' comp, you've got people that there's the indemnification component. You're indemnifying them for the lost wages, but then you're also dealing with all the medical elements that go with it. And that's just a really messy part of the business. And again, where it's messy, it's complicated. Where it's complicated, judgment is more important and documentation is more valuable.
Well, I appreciate having you on, Rock.
Yeah, thank you, Austin. I appreciate the chance to chat with you, and